Hi, this is Suey778 coming at you, and today we have the DMM Check Plus reference standard multimeter shootout. As promised in the previous video for this device, I did say that I was going to take some handheld meters and put them on the table and see how well they all do. We're going to find out how accurate all these guys are. On the far left we have the Kaiweets HT118A. Next one over is the Fluke 17B Plus. Next one over is the UNI-T UT39E+, and on the far right we have the Tilswall FY8233X. Now, these three have been on the channel before as I have reviewed them. The Fluke, generally, I've just been using as a reference meter, and it was my main reference meter until I got the UNI-T UT8804N bench multimeter. But I still use the Fluke a lot here and there on the channel. It's a decent meter. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start over, basically work our way from right to left. We're going to run the gauntlet on all four of these meters. So let's start with the HT118A, and we are going to start with DC voltage. Now this is supposed to come in as 5.000 volts, and the Kaiweets is reading it as 4.999. Okay, not too shabby. All right, let's switch over to AC. And on AC voltage, coming up a little bit shy. It's supposed to be 4.999. It is reading it as 4.956. Still though, not too terrible. The duty cycle, the hertz is reading as 100.0, which it should in this scale. And let's go ahead and check the duty cycle. Duty cycle is coming in at 50%. It should be coming in at 49.98, which this can't display. So in this case, it scaled it up correctly. So looking good there. Okay, let's go ahead and do the resistors next. We're going to start off with 100 ohms here. This should come in as 99.99 ohms, and the Kaiweets is reading it as 100 ohms even. Pretty good. Okay, next up is 1K. This of course should be coming in at 1.0005, so this should scale it up to 1.001, and it does. So that's pretty much right on to the best of this meter's ability. Looks good there. Okay, next up is 10K. And on 10K, we should have 1.0044, so it should just read it as 10.00. It is slightly high there, but still pretty good. All right, and next is 100K. This should be reading as 100.064 kilo ohms, so it should be reading it as 100.1. And it does. Okay, so again, pretty good for the HT118A. Proving again why it's one of my favorite meters. All right, let's go ahead and switch over to the to do the current test. All right, I'm going to start off with DC again. I'm going to start off in milliamps and then drop down to microamps. And on the milliamps, it should read it as 0.9996 milliamps, so it should round it up to 1 milliamp, I would think. And it is reading it as 0.99 milliamps. Okay, well, let's find out why. And actually in that range it is dead on. Wow, 996 microamps, so pretty good there. All right, let's switch over to AC. And it is actually reading the frequency too, so not too shabby there. It is reading it as 990 microamps. The actual reading should be 1.001 milliamps or 1001 microamps. Let's put it up in the milliamp range. And again, it is reading it as 0.98, so it looks like the microamp range is the best there. Okay, so I would say the Kaiweets overall did do pretty well. Okay, so let's move on to the Fluke. Give me just a second here, as we do have to repatch. Let me get Mr. Fluke lit up. Okay, let's go ahead and start with the DC voltage. And again, this should read as 5 even. Oh, oops. There we go. Sorry, I had it in AC. Okay, and it is picking it up as 4.97. Wavering up to about 4.98. So not too bad. Okay, let's go ahead and try the AC side. And it is reading it as 5.53, and there is a very specific reason for that, and that is this is an averaging meter. This is not a true RMS meter. So averaging meters will add about half a volt to the reading, roughly about 11% of the entire reading. And this is probably going to be affected the same way on current. Okay, let's go ahead and measure the hertz. 100 hertz even, which is correct for this scale. And then the duty cycle, 49.9. So it's right there as well. Okay, let's go ahead and switch it over to resistance. I'm going to start with 100 ohms here. Should be 99.99, and the Fluke is rounding it up to 100.1, 100.2. So, it's wavering, but pretty close. Okay. This is 1K. And this should be 1.00, basically 1.0005, and it is reading it as 1.000. And it probably should be reading it as 1.001, but still, that's pretty good. Pretty close. Okay, let's go to 10K. Again, 10.0044, and it is reading it as 10.00 kilo ohms, rounds it up to 10.01. So again, pretty close, not too far off. And last but not least, 100K. And 100K is going to be 100.064 kilo ohms according to the standard, so it should read it as about 100.1 kilo ohms, and it is. So looking pretty good there. All right, let's go ahead and try the current. Need to switch this over. All right, we're going to start off with DC current. And we will, again, start it off in the milliamp range. Okay, it should be 0.9996 milliamps, and it is reading it as 0.99. Let's go ahead and drop it down into the microamp range. And it is reading it as 998 microamps. So not too bad. All right, let's switch over to AC and see what happens. Okay, and here you see again the problem of the 11% basically, a little bit, well, not 11%, but a little bit being added, and that has to do again with the fact that this is an averaging meter. So that reading really should be 1.001, and again, it's adding about 11%. So, and that's in microamps and milliamps. I'm assuming it's going to do the same thing. And, whoops. Yep, same thing. There's your 11% right there. So that's what happens with the averaging meter. But overall, outside of the issue with the with the averaging. You know, this is not a true RMS meter, so you know that was kind of to be expected. But overall, the Fluke did a good job. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over to the UT39E. Let's get her light going. No, not the whole light. There we go. Okay, so again, we're going to start with DC voltage. I've got it in the 20 volt range. And again, it's supposed to be 5 dead even, and we're getting 4.999. I would say that's pretty good. All right, let's switch over to AC. And again, we'll put it in the 20 volt range. And coming up a little short there too, about 4.967 volts. But again, that's still pretty respectable. And as you can see here, it is advertised as true RMS, and it is indeed true RMS. So no problem there. Okay, let's go ahead and check the frequency. If I can find it. There it is. We will not be able to measure duty cycle on this. Okay, but it is showing the frequency. The frequency should be 100.009228 hertz, and it's reading it as 100.01. So yeah, that's for this scale, that's dead on. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the resistance. Okay, we're going to start it off in 100 ohms. So I got a 200 ohm range. Again, this should be 99.99. And we are getting 100.0, well, wavering between 0.1 and 0.2. Okay. I'll quit turning on that backlight. It just goes off too quickly. Okay, here's 100. Need to move it up to the 2K range here. Okay, and it is reading it, should be 1.0005 kilo ohm, and we are getting 0.9999 kilo ohm. So again, really, really close. Okay, let's go to 10K. Shift it up to the 20K range. All right, I'll turn on the light one more time. Okay, this should be 10.0044, so it should read it as 10.004, and it is reading it as 99.96, wavering between 96 and 97. So again, really, really close. Pretty good. All right. And last but not least, let's go to 100K. This should be 100.064, so I would say that would probably read it as, it's going to read it as a decimal. There is no 200K range on this, curiously. And it is reading it as 0.999 mega ohms. Okay, there's 1 mega ohm. Or 0.1 mega ohm, I'm sorry. So it is reading it pretty close to what it should be. It's a little bit low, but not bad. All right, last but not least, let's go ahead and get to the current. Give me just a second while I repatch. Actually, we don't need to repatch on this. Just need to get it in the correct setting. So we're going to go down to the 20 milliamp range. And again, this should read as 0.9996 milliamps. And we are getting it as 0.997. Let me switch to the microamp range. 999.5 microamps, so that's just about dead on. It's off by 1 count. I'll take that. Okay, let's switch over to AC. In fact, it's landing right on 999.6 a little bit there, so cool. All right, let's switch to AC. There we go. Okay, so we're still in the microamp range. And this should be 1.001 milliamps. It's reading it as 993.3 microamps. Just to go up to the milliamp range for a moment. And yeah, about 990, 989, 0.990. So again, it is reading it more accurately in the microamp range. And not too shabby. I mean, it's a little bit off, but not by much. Did pretty well. Okay, so that brings us to the Tilswall. And the Tilswall turned itself off. So let's get that into correct mode. Let's get it patched up. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and go with DC voltage. Again, should be 5 dead even. And we are getting 4.999. I'll make sure that's legible there. Okay. Alright, let's switch over to AC. This is going to be a disappointment. It only has one range for ACC and it's 600 volts. And as you can see, it cannot read anything that low. And we can't do the frequency either. This meter does not do frequency. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to go right next to resistance. That's a bit unfortunate. And, well, we'll see what happens with the current, but I suspect it's going to be the same thing. All right, so let's go ahead and go to resistance. We're going to start off in the 600 ohm range. This is 100 ohms, and again, this should be 99.99. And it is picking it up as 99.8. Okay, wavering a little bit. Pretty good. For a $15 meter, I'll take that. Okay, let's go to 1K. And give me a second, I'm going to have to move it to the 6K range. And again, should be 1.0005 kilo ohms, and it's reading it as 0.998. Yeah, looks like, yeah, 0.997, 0.998 kilo ohms. Again, pretty close, off by a few counts, but not much. All right. Let's go to 10K. Switch up to the 60K range. Okay, this is supposed to be 10.0044. So it should read it just as 10.00, and it is actually reading it as 9.98. Kind of seeing a pattern here. So this is not, you know, it looks like this is kind of a calibration issue maybe with this one. But again, it's not far off. I mean, it's not terrible. All right, let's do the last one, 100K. Again, it's rated for 100.064 kilo ohms, so this should read it as basically 100.1. And again, we're getting the same 99.8, 99.7. This one's actually on, but still, it's still pretty close. I mean, it's not bad. Okay, last but not least, let's do current for this. And the nice thing about this one is all I have to do is flip the switch. We don't have to switch or repatch anything. So let's go up to 600 milliamp range. Go back to DC here. So again, this should come in as 0.9996. I would say this should just read it as 1 milliamp. Oh, wrong AC. There we go. Okay, reading it as, well, actually I'm in the wrong range. All right, there's 60 millifarad or 60 milliamps, and we're getting 0.99, and it should be 0.9996, so it's not very far off. So again, did a pretty good job there. All right, let's switch it over to AC. Yeah, we only have one range for, well, actually we have a couple ranges for AC, 600 milliamps, so maybe we can pick it up. And it looks like we are not getting anything. Okay, let me make sure, yeah, it's AC. So this particular meter, it's a $15 meter, and now we kind of know what the shortcomings are. It's not very reliable on AC voltage readings. or AC current readings. But otherwise it did pretty well for how much it costs. So anyway, barring the winner, I don't know, I would say it's probably between the Kaiweets HT118A and the UNI-T UT39E Plus. The Fluke would have been right there too had it not been an averaging meter though. But the Tilswall, the little Tilswall, as usual, you know, as cheap as it is, and in fact I've seen it as low as $7.99 since I did the review for it, still is a pretty useful little meter as long as you don't need to play around with a whole lot of AC voltage, because about all you can do with it is read AC outlets. But anyway, that's going to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will have at least one more video on this DMM Check Plus coming up in coming weeks. Thanks again for watching. This is Sui778. Until next time.